Imagine the sky turning black at noon. Imagine a wave taller than a 10-story building racing toward the shore. Imagine mountains exploding like gods at war, cities vanishing in a single breath, and entire civilizations erased so completely that only ash and rumor remained. For thousands of years, Earth has unleashed disasters so powerful that ancient people thought the gods themselves were punishing the world. And the strangest part? One of these disasters was so big, it may have changed the course of human evolution itself. Today, we're descending through time to uncover 15 of the most terrifying natural disasters ever recorded, from volcanic eruptions that tore continents apart, to ancient earthquakes that toppled empires, to mythical floods that, shockingly, may have been real. These are events carved into the earth itself. Whether you believe these were the wrath of gods, or the raw mechanics of a living planet, you'll never see Earth the same way again. Alright, let's dive in. And if you like this kind of storytelling, please subscribe. It's a small click for you, but a huge help for the channel. In the late summer of 79 AD, the people of Pompeii woke expecting an ordinary day. Markets bustled, bakers lit their ovens, and children played in the streets. No one noticed the faint tremor beneath their feet, or the thin plume rising from Mount Vesuvius, a mountain they believed was just a mountain. By midday, the world changed. The ground rumbled like a giant stirring from sleep. A blast tore through the sky, sending a towering column of ash and pumice surging upward. Darkness fell as though night had dropped early. Stones rained from above. Roofs collapsed under the growing weight. For hours, Pompeii choked in a storm of falling debris. But the true horror struck later. A pyroclastic surge, a blistering avalanche of superheated gas and ash, erupted from the volcano, racing down the slopes at more than 100 miles per hour. It buried Pompeii and obliterated Herculaneum in seconds, flash-freezing people in their final moments. Entire families remained locked in time, preserved for centuries beneath hardened ash. When the cities were rediscovered nearly 1,700 years later, they emerged like ghostly snapshots of Roman life, a tragic reminder of nature's sudden and merciless power. On the morning of December 26, 2004, the Indian Ocean lay calm. Fishermen heading out, tourists walking beaches, families celebrating the holidays. Beneath the surface, however, the Earth's crust strained. At 7:58 a.m., a massive 9.1 to 9.3 magnitude megathrust earthquake ruptured a 1,000-kilometer fault line off the coast of Sumatra. The planet jolted. The seafloor shot upward, displacing billions of tons of water in seconds. It was the kind of geological event that happens only a few times in a millennium. But the danger wasn't immediate. It began with silence. Minutes later, the ocean receded unnaturally far from shore, exposing reefs, stranded fish, and seabeds that no human was ever meant to walk. Curious crowds gathered, unaware that the sea was gathering power. Then came the roar. A colossal wall of water, in places more than 30 meters high, raced toward coastlines at jet-like speeds. Within minutes, entire villages vanished. Resorts, ports, bridges, and highways were ripped apart. Boats were hurled inland like toys. The destruction stretched across 14 countries, with more than 230,000 lives lost. It became one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history, a stark reminder of how quickly calm seas can turn into unstoppable fury. Around 1600 BC, the island of Thera, today's Santorini, was a thriving center of Bronze Age civilization. Its harbors bustled with Minoan ships, its streets lined with frescoes depicting vibrant trade and ritual. But beneath the island, a colossal magma chamber swelled. Pressure built silently until the earth could no longer contain it. Then, in one of the most powerful volcanic events in ancient history, Thera erupted. The explosion shattered the island, sending ash more than 30 kilometers into the sky and triggering tsunamis that tore across the Aegean. Waves struck Crete, the heart of the Minoan world, destroying ports and coastal settlements. Ash clouds blotted out the sun, choking crops and disrupting trade networks that had flourished for centuries. Over the following decades, the Minoans weakened, their influence fading as Mycenaean Greeks rose. Many scholars believe this catastrophic eruption inspired Plato's tale of Atlantis, a prosperous civilization destroyed in a single day and night of misfortune. Whether or not the myth was born here, the real disaster reshaped the ancient Mediterranean. Thera's eruption became a turning point, demonstrating how a single geological event can topple a thriving culture and echo through legends for millennia. In 1347, a whisper of death arrived in Europe aboard merchant ships from the Black Sea. Rats scurried down ropes, fleas leapt to new hosts, and within days a mysterious sickness spread through port cities. It began with fever and swelling. Then came blackened lymph nodes, delirium, and the chilling knowledge that survival was unlikely. The Black Death, caused by Yersinia pestis, traveled faster than anyone could comprehend. Medieval towns were tightly packed, sanitation was minimal, and fear spread as rapidly as the plague itself. People collapsed in streets, entire households died within days, and physicians were powerless. Chroniclers wrote of mass graves so full that bodies were stacked like cargo. The living could not bury the dead, one observer lamented. The disease swept across Eurasia, reaching from China to England, killing an estimated 75 to 200 million people. The social order cracked. Labor shortages upended feudal structures. Religious movements surged and fractured. Some believed that God was punishing a sinful world. Others blamed outsiders, deepening divisions and sparking violence. By the time the plague receded, Europe was irrevocably changed. The Black Death was not just a health crisis. It was a civilizational reset, reshaping economies, belief systems, and the very fabric of medieval society. In 1815, halfway across the world, Mount Tambora erupted with a fury unmatched in recorded history. The explosion blasted so much ash and sulfur into the stratosphere that global weather patterns warped. By the following year, people would call 1816 the year without a summer. In North America and Europe, spring arrived late and weak. Then, nothing. Frost struck crops in June. In July, snow fell across New England. Lakes froze at dawn. Livestock died, crops failed, and desperate families hunted rodents, ground up straw, or abandoned homes in search of food. Europe, still recovering from the Napoleonic Wars, plunged into famine. Prices soared, riots erupted, and thousands starved. The eerie, dim skies inspired artists and writers. Mary Shelley, trapped indoors during a freezing Swiss summer, wrote Frankenstein. Painters captured blood-red sunsets caused by volcanic aerosols scattered across the sky. Tambora's eruption lowered global temperatures by as much as 3 degrees Celsius, enough to destabilize entire agricultural systems. It was a stark example of how distant geological events can ripple across continents, shaping history, migration, and culture. The world learned the hard way that even a single volcano can temporarily rewrite the climate of the entire planet. Around 74,000 years ago, Lake Toba in present-day Indonesia erupted with a force almost beyond imagination. This wasn't a typical volcanic event, it was one of the largest known eruptions in the last 2 million years. The explosion blasted ash nearly 50 miles into the sky and ejected enough volcanic material to fill entire mountain ranges. Within hours, darkness spread across much of Southeast Asia. Within days, ash clouds circled the planet. Global temperatures plummeted. Sunlight dimmed. Plants withered. Some regions experienced volcanic winter conditions for years. The world entered a deep freeze at a time when early humans were already battling shifting climates. Genetic studies once suggested that humanity's population may have crashed to as few as several thousand survivors, a near-extinction bottleneck. Although modern research debates the exact numbers, there is no doubt Toba was catastrophic. Ecosystems collapsed, megafauna died off, and early human groups were scattered and isolated. For our ancestors, this would have felt like the end of days. Endless cold, darkened skies, famine, and landscapes buried in ash. Toba didn't just scar the earth, it may have reshaped human evolution itself, determining who survived and who the future descendants of the entire species would become. In 1931, a chain reaction of climatic extremes across China unleashed one of the most devastating natural disasters the world has ever seen. The previous winter brought record snowfall. Spring arrived with sudden warmth, melting the snow into swollen rivers. Then came relentless summer rainfall, more than 3 times the seasonal average. The Yangtze, Yellow, and Huai rivers surged beyond their limits. Dikes burst, farmland disappeared beneath vast inland seas. In some regions, water stretched farther than the eye could see, swallowing entire villages. People fled to rooftops and makeshift rafts, surrounded by the wreckage of their homes and the bodies of livestock that hadn't survived the rising waters. Disease followed. Cholera, dysentery, and starvation spread through overcrowded refugee areas. Government records and modern estimates suggest that 1 to 2 million people may have died, making it the deadliest flooding event of the modern era. Survivors described an apocalyptic scene: insects swarming over stagnant water, children separated from families, and the daily struggle to obtain even a handful of rice. The 1931 floods reshaped China's approach to river control, engineering, and disaster response. A calamity so vast it remains a defining chapter in the nation's environmental history. Toward the end of the last ice age, between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago, Earth experienced a series of catastrophic floods unlike anything in modern memory. Massive ice sheets covered continents, sealing in enormous reservoirs of meltwater. When these ice dams finally ruptured, they unleashed torrents with the power to reshape entire landscapes. One of the most dramatic examples is the flooding of the ancient Missoula Lake in North America. When its ice dam broke, more than 2,000 cubic kilometers of water, enough to fill the modern Lake Erie, surged across the Northwest at highway speeds. The flood carved canyons, stripped away topsoil, and scattered boulders the size of houses. Similar outburst floods struck across Europe and Asia, rapidly raising global sea levels. To early humans living near ancient coastlines, these sudden, violent events would have been indescribable. Villages swallowed overnight, hunting grounds drowned, and entire communities forced to flee inland. Many scholars believe these floods may lie behind global flood legends. From Mesopotamia's tale of Utnapishtim to the stories of Manu in India and Deucalion in Greece. These were not myths. They were memories, carved into human storytelling by real and terrifying geological upheavals. On August 27, 1883, the island volcano of Krakatoa erupted with a violence that stunned the world. For months, the volcano had rumbled, belching ash and fire, but nothing prepared nearby residents for the final sequence of explosions. The largest blast was so intense that it ruptured eardrums 40 miles away and was heard over 3,000 miles from the source. The loudest sound ever recorded in human history. The eruption obliterated most of the island, sending ash clouds 80 kilometers into the atmosphere. A pressure wave circled the globe 7 times, registering on barometers worldwide. Then came the tsunamis. Waves over 130 feet high smashed into coastal towns across the Sunda Strait, sweeping away tens of thousands of lives. Skies darkened around the world for months. Sunsets turned fiery red, inspiring surreal artwork and unsettling observers from Europe to Australia. Global temperatures dropped, and weather patterns shifted temporarily. More than 36,000 people perished, though some estimates climb even higher. Krakatoa's eruption was not just a geological event. It was a planetary spectacle, a reminder that the Earth can produce forces so immense they resonate across continents, cultures, and history itself. In June 1783, a fissure cracked open in Iceland's volcanic landscape, an 8-mile-long wound in the earth spewing fire, ash, and toxic gases. This was the Laki eruption, a relentless months-long event that released a sulfur-rich haze so vast it drifted across the North Atlantic and settled over Europe like a phantom fog. Farmers in Iceland watched helplessly as acid rain burned their crops and poisoned their fields. Livestock collapsed by the tens of thousands after eating grass laced with fluorine. Nearly a quarter of Iceland's population either starved or succumbed to the toxic fallout. But the disaster didn't end there. The haze moved into Europe, turning the sky a strange coppery color. People struggled to breathe. Crops wilted under a sun dimmed by sulfur aerosols. In France and Britain, mortality rates surged. Tens of thousands died from respiratory failure. Rivers ran low and drought spread. Some historians believe this chain of agricultural failures helped fuel social unrest, contributing indirectly to the conditions that sparked the French Revolution. Laki was not a single explosion. It was a slow, suffocating catastrophe that darkened skies, ravaged ecosystems, and reminded the Western world that even distant eruptions can reshape history. The year 536 AD entered the historical record as a time when the world seemed to dim. Across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, chroniclers wrote of a strange pale sun that cast no warmth. For 18 months, daylight was weak, crops failed, and temperatures plunged. People described a cold mist, like a perpetual eclipse hanging in the sky. The cause remained a mystery for centuries, until scientific evidence pointed to a massive volcanic eruption, likely in Iceland, that blasted ash high into the stratosphere. This created a persistent haze that disrupted global climate patterns. The consequences were brutal. Harvest failures triggered widespread famine, populations shrank, trade routes faltered. In China, summer snows destroyed crops. In Ireland, famine lasted for years. To make matters worse, just a few years later, the Justinian plague swept through the Byzantine Empire, compounding the devastation. The combination of climate collapse and disease marked the beginning of one of the darkest periods of the early medieval world. Some historians argue that 536 AD helped shape the shift from classical antiquity into the Middle Ages, a global shockwave of cold, hunger, and chaos that reshaped societies for centuries to come. On the morning of November 1st, 1755, Lisbon's churches overflowed with worshippers celebrating All Saints' Day. Then, just after 9:30 a.m., the ground began to tremble, gently at first, then violently. Within moments, buildings crumbled, entire streets split apart. Massive stone cathedrals collapsed onto the faithful inside. As survivors stumbled toward the harbor seeking safety, they watched the ocean retreat, an eerie vacuum pulling ships backward and exposing the seafloor. Minutes later, a tsunami surged inland, sweeping away crowds and smashing what remained of the waterfront. Fires erupted across the city, fueled by overturned candles and fractured chimneys. The blaze raged for 5 days, consuming everything the quake hadn't already leveled. The death toll is uncertain, but estimated in the tens of thousands. Lisbon, once one of Europe's wealthiest capitals, was reduced to a smoking ruin. Intellectually, the disaster shook Europe even more. Philosophers wrestled with questions of fate, divine justice, and human suffering. Voltaire wrote Candide partly in response, criticizing blind optimism in the face of catastrophe. The Lisbon earthquake wasn't just a natural disaster. It became a philosophical and political turning point, challenging Europe's understanding of God, nature, and the fragility of civilization. During the 1930s, America's Great Plains transformed from fertile farmland into a wasteland. Years of aggressive plowing had exposed the region's fragile topsoil, and when drought struck, the land dried and cracked. Without grasses to anchor it, the wind began to lift the soil into the sky, creating massive, suffocating storms known as black blizzards. Dust clouds rose thousands of feet high and drifted across the continent. People in Kansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Texas stuffed rags under their doors and hung wet sheets over windows, yet still woke with layers of dust covering their beds. Livestock died with lungs full of dirt. Families coughed up mud. Cars stalled on highways buried in drifting sand-like sediment. With crops failing and banks foreclosing farms, hundreds of thousands fled west, becoming environmental refugees during the Great Depression. Photographers captured hollow-eyed families standing beside broken wagons, images that defined an era of suffering. The Dust Bowl was a human-created disaster, a stark lesson in ecological imbalance. It forced the U.S. to rethink agriculture, leading to soil conservation programs and new farming methods. It remains one of the most powerful examples of how mismanaging the land can transform rich plains into barren deserts. On March 11, 2011, at 2:46 p.m., a magnitude 9.0 earthquake, the strongest ever recorded in Japan, struck off the coast of Tohoku. Buildings swayed violently but remained standing. Japan's engineering had prepared well for shaking, but the danger had only begun. Far offshore, the seafloor had shifted upward by nearly 50 meters, displacing unimaginable volumes of water. Within minutes, tsunami alerts flashed across the country. Sirens wailed. People raced toward high ground. Then the wave arrived. In some coastal towns, it reached 133 feet high. It swallowed forests, airports, farmlands, homes, and entire neighborhoods. Cars, ships, and trains were lifted and carried inland like toys in a river. Over 18,000 people were killed or went missing. The disaster triggered a secondary crisis at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, where seawater flooded backup generators, causing cooling systems to fail. Meltdowns followed, releasing radioactive material and forcing massive evacuations. It became the worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl. The Tohoku disaster proved that, even in an age of satellites, sensors, and advanced engineering, nature can still deliver blows beyond our expectations, reminding us that technology can reduce risk, but never eliminate it. Earth has always been a force far greater than us. Yet every catastrophe also shows humanity's resilience, our ability to rebuild, adapt, and learn. Which of these events shocked you the most? And do you think ancient myths hide memories of real catastrophes once experienced by our ancestors? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everything you send. If you want more epic history and legendary storytelling, hit subscribe and turn on notifications.